Welcome to the BuildASoil 10x10, Season 2. We're on episode 11 right now, and I'm walking you back to the tent where we've got a lot of work to do. So come in, let me show you where we're at. Flowers coming around the corner. So I want to show you in here today. A lot's changed even since the last time we videoed. If you take a look, you can see it's filling up. But to get ready for flower, we have some strategy, we have some timing, and I want to reiterate that timing is a big part of the flowering process, and I want to drive home a few of the points that maybe I haven't mentioned so far about container size, timing, top dressing. And to allow me to show you and illustrate it rather than talk, I'm gonna go through each one of the quadrants and share with you the dilemmas that I'm facing, what I'm thinking about. Now, I could probably flip right now, but I've got some before and afters of trellising, some tucking to do over here. Realistically, I really wanna fill these screens so that when we go to flower, these ones especially that stretch a lot, we give it the best chance at a good yield in here as possible with the limited plant count that we have. And then over here, they're starting to get to the size where I need to go to flower, and I want to explain that relationship to you because a lot of you have mentioned it looks like I have so much room, so much height. Why would I be worried about going to flower soon? Things look great right now. And so I want to keep it that way, and I'll explain a little more as we go. I've got to make some trellises in Quadrant 4, and I've got a few more things to do. At the end, I'm going to end this with a trellis, a top dressing, because it flowers next week. I'm going to prepare for that ahead of time. And I also want to do a foliar spray. And the foliar spray is to help with a little bit of the stress from defoliating and tucking them back under the screen. And it's one of my favorite foliar sprays, so I want to explain how it works, why I make it, and how you might benefit from it. So let's get started. I'll start in Quadrant 1 and I'll walk you through right now. So jump down here with me. These are all the cuts that I've just got sitting here because these are all pulled off of the scrog screen that I put on the earth box. And this is a mod scrog. I built it with the bamboo. I'm going to show you how I do that and why I did that. These are extra. I'm just going to give these away. And I'm going to take a whole bunch more off when I do the other plant over here. And that's why I've got the cup here. This is some aloe, and this is what I do my pre-soak. So when I give them away, they'll be easy to root for whoever takes them. That's what's going on here. I'll move this out, and we'll just keep this in this quadrant for now. Let's talk about the seedlings. So most recently, the last thing that I did is I defoliated the large leaves. And the big leaves are the ones like this that are connected to the main stalk here and are large in size, where all the other leaves that are connected as the large leaves secondarily, I'm leaving those on right now. And that allowed them to kind of globe out a little bit. Normally I would start bending the tops. And if you followed along with the BuildASoil way for a while, you know that if the top gets lower than the side branches like this, these now get the auxin hormone. They now get a lot of the boost in growth. And this, if I were to top it, would have two tops. I prefer to bend, and that will change the hormones so that this all starts to bush out. Now, I'm not gonna do that on any of these plants. I'm just gonna let them hang out and do their thing. Sometimes when I grow seedlings for the very first time, I like to just see what they do naturally. Now, I am gonna defoliate a little bit. We are still working with a flat light, and even if they do stretch a little, I want these side branches to do well. So one of the things that I've got to do today is start to pull some of these big leaves again, as they've already jumped in size since the last week when I pulled them. So you can use scissors, or on these, if you just go in here and pinch, they usually just snap right off. And if you notice, look at this, beautiful big leaf, 9 leaflets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And if you look over here, I've got 11 leaflets popping out right here. So you can see the 2 new ones that have come in that are really small. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So 11 leaflets. And what's interesting is it's on every single one of these seeds from 2 different breeders. So we've got the icicles back here, and then we've got the 2 bloom genetics. So we've got the mountain trop back cross, which is right here. And then we've got the papaya osmelon, which is right here. And they all are throwing 11 leaf. They're all in 3.0, and they're all underneath the timber cypress. I've basically given them water only besides a root wise, a Q, no food at all, just straight regular water or beneficial, so to speak. And right now, the next thing that I'm thinking about here is, besides removing more of these leaves, which I need to do because that's the minimal training that I'm doing to manage the flat light that's in here, I'm gonna take a few more of these off. I need to top dress. So to do that, I'm actually gonna be removing the drip system because it's gently in here with stakes and it's taped on the side. So I'll flip this out of the side. I'll be able to do my full top dress, and then I can go just put this back on. I would like to get started, but first I'm gonna go through all the quadrants, and then I'm gonna do the work so you can see some of it in action. And in that way, I'm less likely to get time consumed with the work and forget to mention something important in one of the other quadrants. So My top dress is gonna consist of craft blend and gnarly barley, and I'm also going to put the BuildASoil because we're getting ready for flower, and I wanna put some new material up here, the compost with the craft blend and gnarly barley to help make more soil on top with these browns and greens that are here. It's gonna make fresh soil. Basically, compost is browns and greens. We've got the compost that I'm adding that's already finished, the nutrients. It's gonna be like a buffet up here. And I wanna make sure in the 5 gallon they've got access to everything that they need. And then I'm gonna leave the cashew blend off. I'm gonna let them do their thing. And then in a week or two, I'm gonna add cashew blend to kind of light that on fire, if that makes sense. And I feel like I probably will not even have to feed these. However, in a 5 gallon, when I go through stretch, I might wanna add a compost tea or something soluble to make sure that I can keep up with them. And one of the things that I wanna mention while we're here talking about the 5 gallons, I mentioned earlier, a lot of people talk about the height, how I have so much room in here, why would I be worried? And I've mentioned that these are basically ready to go to flower. If I wait too long, it could be detrimental to the finished product. Now, the reason why is I like to keep this plant here as above, so below. I'd like to keep this shape and size similar to the size of the container. And the reason why is when I go to flower, this can double or triple in size depending on the genetics. And what I'd like to see is, besides the room to expand with the leaf growth, I like to match that with room to expand with root growth. Part of the reason why is the root, as it is going out of the plant into the soil and it's mining its food, as it's going through the tip of the root, that sloughing off point where it's expanding, that's where it can consume nutrients the most easily, especially calcium. And it seems like as it has more abundant source of soil to stretch its roots out and get new food fast while it's going through the stretch into the first 2 weeks of flower. So if you're new to this, the first 15 days, 14, 15, sometimes 20 days, is the stretch period where the plants grow faster than they've ever grown before, and they're jumping in size as if they're ready to receive pollen or spread pollen, and it's gonna be their last hurrah. They're an annual flowering plant. They put all their energy into basically springing into flower and changing their hormones and getting ready to stack flowers instead of just leaves. And during that time, we want that root stretch. And if we don't have it, what I wanna do is trick it by doing a top dress of the compost and nutrients. A week ahead of time, it's gonna start to break down, and that's gonna give new feeder roots the opportunity to expand. So by the time I flip to flower, keeping them not overgrown and a good top dressing going into flower, that should trick them enough into getting enough nutrition to allow them to fully stretch and get the roots to pop off in there too. So that's the plan here. If I were to do like a lot of beginners, number one mistake I see, they'll see this and they'll say, wow, I'm doing great. I really want bigger plants though. And they'll veg a plant 2 to 3 times this size out of a 5 gallon. Then they'll go into what looks like a good finishing size into flower at that point. And at that point, they've already exhausted their soil. Then it goes in a stretch. And when it stretches, it grows twice as fast as it ever has before, and it outpaces any availability of nutrient. And then they start thinking, what is it? Do I add this or that instead of adding everything? And they start chasing their tail. And so I want you to avoid that by making it easier on yourself, by flipping to flower earlier than you need and giving the maximum root stretch capabilities. Now in a 5 gallon, worst case scenario, I've got compost tea. I can do the Coco castings, makes a killer tea full of nutrients. I've got Organics Alive, Blue Gold, the Build-A-Bloom. I've got a number of soluble organic products that I can use in here, but I'm hoping to lean on that top dress, so I'll show you when I do it. Let's get into the next quadrant. So quadrant 2. If you look at quadrant 2, it's doing really well. In fact, this cover crop here, I want to point out, was not here before the weekend. It's Monday. On Friday, this was not even, it wasn't even here. It grew all the way through because it caught the light. It saw it through the canopy, and it just busted out and it's going for it. So I'm gonna be dropping that down, chopping and dropping it so it's not vining up in here completely. But I wanted to illustrate how fast it's going. Now this is the bed we did the soil doctor consulting on, and it's the take and bake kit. So if you remember, we did the take and bake, we ran a cycle in it, it did great. And then we did a soil test and I added all the stuff back, micronutrients, the gnarly barley for the nitrogen, and the plant is doing really, really well in here. The Bransons grew slower last time. The screen's basically full. So today what I'd like to do in this quadrant is I've got to continue stretching this underneath the screen and showing you that process so we get more tops in here. This is the last time I'm gonna tuck it underneath here, and then I will have it as full as I'm gonna have as we flip to flower next week. So I need to tuck today. I'm gonna show you how, and I'm not going to top dress here. This is a big bed of soil. I already top dressed a lot in here. The cover crop's going crazy. At some point, I might smash that down and chop and drop that a little bit, but I'm not going to top dress in here because this has already been heavily amended, and I want to lean on that soil test instead of overdoing it. I think less is more. A lot of times I like to keep it even keel by top dressing all the time when I go into flower, but this had such a big top dress starting out and has so little veg time, I think we're fine to ride it through. And with this big bed of soil, I can always do another soil test or amend accordingly for the next round, and we'll be set up. So I'm not worried about depleting the soil, where if it was a small container, like the 5 gallons, I'd want to top dress no matter what to make sure I don't bottom out as far as the nutrients go. So that's where we're at here. I'll probably raise the lights up a little bit today. However, since I'm going to be tucking it a little, I may end up just leaving it in the same spot. Over here in quadrant 3, let me set this down. I'm probably going to raise the light up today. However, I do have one last tuck to do, so I might wait until tomorrow to match both quadrants. The next light raise is going to be over the fan, so it'll be a little bit higher. That'll allow me to crank the lights up just a little bit, give it a little more brightness in here, and that will, then I'll do some par testing and see from the canopy at the light height really where we're at. I've already raised quadrant 4 because I'm over there building the scrog screens today and I needed some headroom. Now, you've noticed since the last time I did these, they've all popped up in here. A lot of these lower branches are coming up into the middle of the canopy here. They are stretching quite a bit though, so I'm gonna have to tuck all these under just like I'm gonna have to do in the 3x3 and make sure they stay under. The last thing I'm gonna have to do today over here is to go underneath and pull some of these lower branches like this one that just aren't gonna make it up to the top and are taking energy, these suckers. I'll be pulling them out and explaining how I do it, and then I've gotta do the same top dressing I'm doing to the 5 gallons over here on the 30 gallons. Even though they're big, I wanna make sure they're loaded. This is BuildASoil Light, and one of the great things about it is it's kinda like no-till already. It's basically balanced, and then before I go into flower, I get to add what I want, and that'll keep that cycle on an even keel the whole time. Growth is looking phenomenal in here. It's basically busting through the screen. I have to do, you see it's like 6 inches above in some of the spots back there. I've got to do some tucking, so I'll show you how I do that. When we're done in here today, it'll be underneath the screen, fully flat across all the canopies in here, and we'll finally have built the scrog screens in quadrant 4, the earth box. Now, I wanted to do a comparison. Let me roll this out of the way so you can see the difference between the two that are basically the same size. This is the after, this is the before. And see how big this plant is? It almost looked bigger than the ones in the 30 gallons, but it's not. The 30 gallons were bigger, faster, so I had to trim those sooner, and that made them look slightly smaller. Once I put the screen on, I had pruned them up. But now they're already pushing the screen. Today, this one, when I'm done, will look like this one, and I'd like to show you on camera how I do this. Now, I could have built a screen across the whole thing, but I like the idea of doing the modular so I can roll them around and get in here. And it was so easy to do on the others, I decided to follow, so I'm gonna do the same thing here. I just took a bamboo pole 4-footer and I literally just shoved it in there. And in the future, when I want to top dress, I can still just lift this up and slide it up the pole and I can get in there, no problem. So that's what we'll be doing. We'll probably speed through some of it on camera. I'll try not to talk the whole time, but I do have some points to make as we go. And I do have this cup here so that any of these lowers that need to get pulled off here, I can keep as clones and give away later. Oh, quadrant 4, one last thing. It's drinking the water now pretty routinely. So on Friday, I filled that reservoir up and this reservoir up and even the small one. And all 3 of them drank the reservoir this morning. This one's almost empty. I didn't fill it up, but these 2 I already filled up. All I'm doing, to remind you, is when they get dry, I add water. That's all I've done. When I top dress the other quadrants today, I'm gonna top dress these the same, and I'll show you one of them. Underneath here, no top dressing has been done yet except for the first one. I'm gonna add compost, top dressing. You can see some rove beetles in here. It's already starting to get alive, but we need the feeder roots to start to develop, and much like that quadrant, even though they can send roots stretch into the reservoir, I want them to have the feeder roots there. She's not gonna put out more flower than she can support, and so if we take this plant and we have no food and no room to stretch the roots, it's gonna be a lower yield. But in the earth box, it hacks it, it tricks it. It's like, wow, I have unlimited water, unlimited root stretch, tons of food, why wouldn't I put out a huge yield? Where if this flower, its only job was to produce a finished flower with seed in it, if that was its job in nature and it tried to produce so much flower that it wasn't able to finish any, then its one job wasn't done. And so because of that, nature's not gonna overproduce and not make it to the end. And that's why it'll at least get some flower finished and it'll be a lower yield. So we're gonna trick it, top dressing, having the bottom water there, similarly to how I trick it over here by giving it that root stretch room. So I hope that makes sense. If you've got questions about the root stretch or what I mean by that, pop them in here. I'm kind of just making up my own terminology, but it's how I've come to understand it over years of working with the plant. And I think that others that do the same, that have grown this plant for a while, they'll notice the same thing. When you have room for the roots to stretch and room for the canopy to stretch, it usually does its job a little bit better. And we're just gonna go around and do all the work that I have to do today. It's time to get started. Okay, I'll put all my scraps in here. I'm gonna start here. Now, normally I use like specialty trimming scissors, but I had some Fiskars sitting here, and so I'm gonna grab those and go with it. One plant at a time, and I'm just gonna be taking the big leaves off. I can pinch them, I can take them off with my hands. Just beautiful leaves. That's the papaya osmelon. And remember, I'm not trying to completely take all the leaves off. The leaves are obviously what's making it grow, but I am trying to get it to not block some of these lower branches because it's a flat light in here. It's not like we're outside where the light goes around the plant. And I'm mainly gonna take the lowers off now that are just below the canopy. Normally I'd take this lower branch off, but because I can spread these 5 gallons out, even the lowers can get some side light because they're not gonna be blocked completely by the plant. So we'll see. I'll probably leave that until I'm just sure that it's gonna get completely blocked by the light. But I'm not gonna leave on these lower branches any of the other branches that are on it. Only the main lead. I'm gonna lollipop it is what they call it, where you reduce it down to just one main top, basically. I didn't take off a ton, but that definitely opened it up quite a bit. Now you can see all the way through there. Everything's gonna receive light. I went through and trimmed them all. You notice I also removed leaves that were blocking the lower. That way each thing receives light. And so the bigger leaves that were blocking things from the flat light, I basically took off. The other thing that I do, you probably saw, is every inner branch, I removed the little suckers that are down here. See how there's one right here? Let me show you. See that? I want to take that off because it's probably not going to produce. Now this little sucker right here, it might jump up and produce a little nug there. I can always determine at what line I want. So anything below this kind of mark I've taken off. This one I'll probably take off too. That's the sucker. I even left the leaf on that one because it wasn't blocking anything. You can see there's 2 more down here though. See that? I don't want it to waste trying to grow into a branch and produce flower, so I'm gonna pull that off before it does it. And now it's basically got shaved legs. See how clean they are? All the way up, shaved the legs, looking good, lots of airflow. All the leaves that are blocking something are removed. I've got a bucket full of material here. This will go into the worm bin. I could also chop it up with my scissors, and I can include some of this in the top dress that I do with the actual compost. I don't always do that, but you totally can. I'm usually more doing that when there's a larger bed and 5 gallons. I'm trying to limit the amount of composting I'm doing right in the container. It's not as big of an ecosystem. That's part of why I like bigger containers. It's a little more forgiving on the type of top dressing that I'd like to do all the time. So before I get into the next quadrant, I do want to get into top dressing, and I want to go fairly quickly because it's going to take a lot of time to do everything I want to do today. I'll do this one that's closest right here. And so all I'm going to do is take my stakes out of my drip system, which if you watch the last episode, you know how I do this. That's it. These stakes just pop off. I can reposition them wherever I'd like. And then this, I'm just going to leave. It's taped on here, and I don't want to completely remove it. So I've got that just sticking out the side. I'll leave any stakes that I want right here. Now I have full access to this area, to the cover crop, to the mulch layer, to get in here and top dress. So what do I want to add? Well, if we look in here, it's nice and moist. We can see that the soil's got roots growing out of it from all the cover crop. I'd like to add in the craft blend. I'd like to add in the gnarly barley. I'd like to add in the BuildASoil, and I've got it right here. The BuildASoil is a top dress that has amendments, and it has different composts already mixed in there. So it's a little more diverse than just buying a bag of compost. I'm gonna grab it by the tab here, pull it off, show you what it looks like, and then I'm just gonna begin. It's just basically really heavy, copious amounts of minerals, nutrients, and composts. That's what's gonna go on top to kind of build up that top layer, the mulch layer, so to speak, on top of the straw and cover crop and everything. Now I can do it super heavy, or I can do a little bit and keep adding as I go. Since they're 5 gallons, I want to avoid overdoing anything. Keep it kind of on an even keel. I can always add more later, but it's harder to take it out once I've already done it and I'm watering through it. So this is what the gnarly barley looks like before I grind it up. It's a whole bunch of pre-sprouted seeds, which are full of enzymes and nutrition. Seed meal is the best organic fertilizer, but pre-sprouted, like the sprouted bread, sprouted seeds for human nutrition, they have more nutrition and enzymes, and so that's why we're using them. We've also got the craft blend, which is all of our amendments, our favorite ones mixed together in one. If you've watched BuildASoil at all, you know this is our go-to amendment for pretty much everything. I'm gonna do the amendments first, then I'm gonna put the compost on. About a 1/4 cup of craft blend. Right on top of everything. Then I'm gonna wiggle it with my fingers a little bit. And this is just gonna get it so it has some contact with the actual soil instead of just sitting on top here. Then I'm gonna grab about the same amount of the gnarly barley, so 1/4 cup. Go around, sprinkle it, and then I'm gonna wiggle it in with my fingers so it doesn't just sit up here. There we go. I've got a couple of leaves in there from when I was defoliating. I didn't put them all up here. I took most of them out for the worm bin, but a few of them won't hurt anything and they'll just break down along with the cover crop. Okay, now that's my main top dressing. I'm gonna grab the Build-A-Flower now. And I could literally smother the entire top with this. But in an effort to show you how much I'm putting on here, I'm gonna use my scooper and just do a 1/2 cup at a time until I'm happy with the volume. So 1/2 cup, that's a full cup. Might as well make it 2 full cups of the Build-A-Flower. Looks like it'll be a decent volume that I can add more to later if I want. This is gonna give those feeder roots somewhere to go. It's gonna start training them before I go into flower. Before the stretch starts, they're gonna know it's up here. And then when I go into flower, those feeder roots are so trained that if I do need food, I can hit it right here and they're gonna take it immediately instead of having to 180 their whole life, figure out where the food's at. It won't smother at all. Some of this is just gonna fight through and grow through it. Some of it's not because it's already underneath the canopy and it was fairly weak, but some of the stuff out the edges might just keep going. And I'm fine with that. I can always chop it with scissors later, or I can work in another top dress. The other thing I'm considering here is even though I'm dripping, I don't want the water to spill out the sides when I'm hand watering. So I don't want to overload it. And that's part of why I left a little bit of room in these 5 gallons for me to do this. I knew I'd be top dressing. That's the top dress that I'm going with. I'm gonna hand water just a tiny bit, but since the hand watering doesn't bother the drip, I'm just gonna set this back up and get it installed. There we go. Drip seems pretty even. I'll put this first one back in that was holding it all together. This just holds the drippers kind of above the mulch layer so they're not just sitting straight in it. Now instead of boring you, I'm gonna do the same to the other plants. One last thing that I'll do today is I'm gonna water this in just to make sure that this gets a little bit wet on the top everywhere, and I'll let the drip do the rest of the job. To address the drip, since the last time I videoed, I left here on Friday last week. The drip was all installed. I let it run on its own Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And that was running 2 2-minute cycles per day. And everything was great. I did not come in on Saturday. I did not come in on Sunday. This was completely on its own. I was a little worried this weekend when I didn't come in. Everything made it. The drip handled the job perfect. They were just getting to the point of being a little bit dry. And so it was time for me to water, but it wasn't an emergency because the drip was on and it handled it. And of course, 30s were so big, they were fine without water, the 3x3. But I did put a whole chapin into the 3x3 this morning. I put a whole chapin across those 3 this morning, and I filled all the reservoirs. So had I not had the drip system on there, these 5 gallons would have been drooping pretty hard. I would have had to come in, and this would have been the first weekend that I had to. Previous to this, they were pretty small, and the 5 gallons had enough moisture for the weekend. You know, I don't want to fail in front of all you, so I probably should have come in this weekend. I relied a little bit more than I should have on the drip, and it came through for me, so I'm super stoked. Let's get to Quadrant 2 before I end up spending all my time up here. Next up, I've got the extra PVC. We'll be building another layer of scrog screen on here, but because this is not a huge stretcher, this first layer is what's gonna dictate where my actual buds start to stretch from when I flip. If I don't get this kind of filled as full as I can, these others are really gonna outstretch it, and I will have suffocated this one too much. So this will be the last time I tuck this one. The others, I might have to tuck a little more. They grow a little faster. This Branson's veg is just a little slower. Let's get in here. Let's show you what that looks like. I'm gonna move these onto the floor, get my coffee out of here, which I do not need right now. And I'm gonna address this cover crop real quick. Here, the cover crop, it went through the canopy. If I didn't address this, it's gonna start to wrap itself up onto my grow light, wrap itself around the plants, and it can actually suffocate them a little bit. It's not the end of the world. A lot of people do let these literally produce peas up in their canopy and it doesn't bother them. Some people, it really bothers them and they don't like vines at all. I'm gonna go down here and I'm just gonna chop this. And this is actually gonna go back into my bed as a chop and drop. The cover crop's really healthy in here because the amount of nitrogen we added in here. We don't normally add significant amounts of nitrogen to our soil recipe, rather spoon feed it with aminos or by top dressing later. But this cover crop, after that soil test and the amendment, it is crushing it in here. It's looking really good. All the cover crop, look, it's just everywhere popping. It's got the moisture right in here. So I'm gonna do a little bit of smashing. I've done this before on the other 30 gallons. Part of animal husbandry, if you follow the holistic land management method, holistic decision making, animals would do, what the cows would do, what they're supposed to is trample all the cover crop down, eat a little bit, go to the bathroom, you know, provide some manure, and then they would move on. And so I'm just gonna kind of slow this cover crop down, and then I can add my top dressing in here if I were to. Because I'm not, I'm just gonna let this do its thing and make sure there's no vines that are wrapping, nothing in the back that's getting out of control. I love this cover crop. I'm gonna keep the diversity in it, but if you go pull your vines down, it'll make it super easy on you before it gets late in the flower. Okay, so there we've got everything smashed down. That'll give it a little more time to have to rebound and do its thing. Now what I've got to do is tuck, and I have decisions. Essentially, if we look up here now, I've got open quadrant here, and that's about it. Other than that, this is full. I could start to defoliate. You can see like this leaf right here. See how it's blocking? And now this is gonna get light. That's part of what I have to do today besides just tucking is remove some of these big leaves that are gonna block some of the lowers from actually jumping up and coming to the screen. But before I do that, I'm gonna tuck them all. So right here, this is perfect, but I want it to go more this direction so I can fill this empty part of the screen. Same thing here. I just go right here, pull it under the screen, pull it over, pull it over. And then I want to be gentle, like this is the top. It's a little bit stiffer. I don't want to just pull and snap anything. So I'm going to be gentle and pull it underneath the screen like that. Okay, the more I do that, the more flat this gets in here, the more plant material crams up into the screen, the more tops there are going to be when I go flip to flower, which means the more big bud sites. That's my main goal. So besides pulling these underneath the screen and getting it flat again, I'm pulling them the direction I want them to go, so I'm not crowding all the colas in one area. I can also go completely out and have buds on the side here that I can then kind of twist tie to the sides or support like that. And so it doesn't have to be just inside the scrog screen. Once I've pulled them all, then I'm gonna go de-leaf any leaves that are blocking them from continuing to grow through the screen. All the lower ones that I want to come up and become tops are the ones that are gonna be replacing it where I bend the tops. Okay, let's go around the back here. So here's where I could probably go outside now. It's just so tall. So if I put it over there, it's gonna wanna hold itself. Maybe these tops will actually come up and I can keep bending this way. I might just go to the left with it, right there. That looks pretty good. It's okay if this one's not fully tucked under. Like I mentioned, it's a slower stretcher. So I want a lot of these lowers to jump, but I don't want to fully suppress the top. Now sometimes if I've got a top over here and a top over here, instead of them like crowding them out, I'll cross one top back over this way and one top over this way. So even though they're in different spots, it's underneath the screen and it's still filling the screen, if that makes sense. Got a lot of big leaves I'm gonna have to take off, I can tell. But for the most part, we're getting it nice and tucked where it's underneath the screen everywhere. Try not to poke myself with bamboo. Let's get this fully tucked. I'll pull a few leaves off, then I'll go into the next quadrant. See, this one's gonna make it up to the top now. That's great. I'm gonna leave those leaves on, let it use all its energy to get up. Where this one that's really going far, I'm just gonna bend it all the way under. These will shoot up a little bit, give me some more tops later. You can see it's all pretty much flat. I'm gonna push these as far as I can. And then if they pop back out, it's fine. In another day or two, they're gonna grow further and they'll be able to hold their tuck. They'll be taller, and that's fine. But look under here. See how I still have some of these suckers? So see right there? That little new branch is gonna try its hardest to just put out a whole branch there. I'm never gonna get good flower off of it deep here underneath the canopy. So I'm just gonna use my fingers and pinch that off. But since it's under here, and I'm trying to stage my work, I know this will probably be pulled off later. I'm just gonna pull the lowers and the suckers off. So anything way below the screen here. Now see how this one's probably not gonna make it up? Here's another trick. I can move this one up, straight up, and now it's already to the screen. And the other branches will hold it there and it'll become a top on its own, especially if I remove these suckers to give it more energy to shoot straight up instead of growing these side branches. So I'll do that right now. Here's some lowers, it's another sucker. See how this one has got a sucker on it? It's never gonna make it up there. This one's receiving light pretty well. It's not far from the screen, so I'll leave it, but anything below that mark, I'm just gonna remove so it doesn't waste its time. And there's multiple opportunities to do this, so you don't have to pull off every leaf if it's borderline. You can always see what the plant does later, kind of watch, and then react accordingly. Okay, that's what I'm gonna do on every one of these Branson's Royal Revenge, and when I'm done, they will all be big leaf like this one was, that they'll still be bent under the screen like this. All these leaves that get kind of bent over underneath the screen like that, I pull those off too. That way it exposes the branch to want to grow upwards. And I don't need this leaf because once it's like this, it's gonna have to turn back over and I'd rather just pull it off. So there we go. That's the plan for the 3x3, no top dressing, anything. Over here, I'm gonna do more of what we just did in that quadrant, plus I'm gonna top dress the same way that I did in quadrant 1. Craft blend, gnarly barley, and I'm gonna use the BuildASoil. Later on, I'll throw some kashi blend in. Later on, I'll be using some fermented plant extracts, all the fun stuff, just to kind of show you how it works. For now, I'm just keeping it fairly simple, as this is a big part of the work and I don't want to overcomplicate it. So, see this one, this sucker? I should have probably pulled that before. It didn't make it, so I'll get scissors and I'll cut that one off. In fact, it's probably weak enough I can just rip it. I don't want you to always rip because sometimes you'll pull, like string it down like string cheese, and I want you to be careful of that. A lot of these lower leaves down here need to come off now. They're just not doing anything. Anytime I have one down low that can be pushed up, I want to push it up into the screen. And then any one that's up top that can be pushed out further, I want to pull it out further, wider to the screen. So the biggest branches go out to the edges and the littlest branches come up to the top. And so instead of being long and wide, you can make them tall and they'll make it to the screen. The ones that are too tall, you make long and wide. Beyond that, if certain ones just don't make it up there, I'm gonna have to decide. Like for instance, this one, is it ever gonna make it all the way up? Or is it just worth completely pulling off? And if I do pull it off, I'll probably just keep them as clones. And so instead of letting you watch me do this entire thing, I'm just gonna clean it up accordingly. Essentially anything that, even though it looks good, can't make it up to the screen, I'll be pulling off. And any of the big inner leaves in here with suckers on them or anything that's not gonna make it to the screen like that will never make it, I'm gonna just pull these off so that all of the legs are clean in here and everything that has an opportunity to get to the screen is gonna get to the screen. Anything that's never gonna make it, I'm pulling. And in that way, I structure all of the energy in the flat canopy where it's gonna make the most sense to use it, and I'm keeping the rest just removed. Also, you'll notice, last time I did this, I smashed the cover crop down, and I told you it jumped back. It jumped back with a vengeance. It needs to be smashed down again, and I'll do that with probably all the mulch leaves that I'll most likely throw in here. But I did not do this yet over in the earth box quadrant, and that's the last quadrant. In an effort to save time and not go over too much, I'm just gonna illustrate that what I'm doing here is the same I just did. Pulling the inners out, flattening them underneath. I'm gonna be pulling these ones in the back that are 6 inches above the canopy. I'm gonna pull those back in and stretch them out further. That's it. Then I'm gonna top dress exactly the same as I did the last quadrant 1. In here, I'm gonna put ½ cup craft blend, ½ cup of the gnarly barley. I'll grind up some more. And then instead of just doing 2 cups of the Build-A-Flower top dress, I'm probably gonna do double, triple that, spread it around in here so there's a good layer of compost in here. And that's it. Since it's in the feeder layer up top, it's not like I'm mixing it in the soil where it has to be perfect. It's just an abundant extra that's not force-fed. It's a buffet where the plant can send its roots up and eat whenever it wants, feed the worms up there, break down in the mulch layer, activate all that bacteria, and that'll make sure that we have all that energy on tap when we go into stretch. And that's coming as soon as we flip to flower, which is less than a week and away now. By the end of the day, I'll have all that done here. So quadrant 4, this is gonna be a bit of work. All right, I'm gonna roll this out of the way. This plant's a little smaller, but it's at the canopy height. So I think that by removing some of these, I'll keep a few really healthy tops on here. And because there's only gonna be a few tops, I bet you these are gonna be some of the biggest, best buds. It's gonna put all its effort into those few tops, where these other earth boxes are gonna have so many tops, it's gonna distribute its energy a little bit differently. That's not ideal. I'd like them all to be the same size. But if you remember, this is the no-till earth box. So these two are fresh. This one was a little bit heavy. And when I tilled the cover crop in here from the 2 cycles ago on its no-till, as I tilled the cover crop in and watered it, I accidentally overwatered it. And with the cover crop not drinking, it was just a little bit heavier than the brand new fresh earth boxes, which are easier to hit the target on. So it did grow a little slower, but nonetheless, it's very healthy. It's drinking its reservoir now. But on camera, I wanna show you how I did this one so you can see, and how I defoliate and remove some of those leaves so that we're ready to get to flower next week. So I'll move this out of the way. So before I just jump in and build this, I wanna explain my thinking on it. I could have easily built a PVC scrog screen, but I have multiple size plants. I wanted to be able to roll them around and access back here to this quadrant if I need to crawl around the corner. So I'm using the earth boxes, since they have wheels, to build a modular scrog screen. All I did was take some pretty decent bamboo. When you buy a pack, some of them are thinner, some of them are thicker. I took the straightest, thickest ones, and all I do is I go in here and there's already a hole in the earth box cover. If that's there, I use that. If it's not there, I just poke a hole in. And I'm literally going down until it stops, and that's it. That's all I'm doing. Then I'm gonna twist tie here the cross beams so that I have 4 cross members connected to the main. After that, I just kind of build it like a ladder and twist them on. Nothing special, but now that you know what I'm doing, I'm just gonna get started so we can kind of time lapse this. We just got finished building the trellis and removing a lot of the lowers. Look at everything I pulled off of there. Now, had I left this on there, it would have been a jungle of plant material in here, but it may not have been a jungle of finished flower that I really wanted to deal with. A lot of times we create a lot of extra work by creating these little small buds underneath that are more susceptible to issues. They're a little bit larfier. They're not as fun to smoke. They're not as finished and developed. I want most of the good bud to be above the top screen. That's why if you look underneath here, it's pretty clean underneath there. We basically shaved the legs up, pulled off any of those suckers off the inner leaves, any of the big fan leaves that were blocking light, and we also pulled off a whole bunch of really good cuttings. This is just from these 2 plants. All of these are going to be trimmed down into viable clones, or cuttings that you can root to make into clones. The color's really good, the health is really good. Happy to give these away to anybody that wants them, and that's part of how the garden just keeps giving back. It's really rewarding, and that's, I think, one of the reasons why a lot of us do this. We want to share herb with our friends, we want to share clones, we want to grow all the flavors. You just get into it. So the goal over here is going to be bringing these continually, this is the top, to the front. And eventually, it may not look like it, but this is going to make it out here. It may not make it all the way, we'll see. These are pretty fast veggers, and we have another week to go before we flip, but the goal is going to be to fill as much of these screens as possible so that when they jump to flower, we've got beautiful buds across this entire screen here. These I'm going to give away. I'll set down. Because they're easy to roll, I'm going to get in here and vacuum and wipe down a little bit before I tuck them away for the day. And the last thing I'm going to do, probably before I clean up, since we'll make it a little mess, is a foliar spray. And before I do that, I want to do one more top dressing. Here in Quadrant 4, the main difference is the earth box and how we deal with it. I like a lot more volume of top dress in an earth box. It's set up to deal with it. If I crammed these 5 gallons with 4 inches of food, I couldn't water anymore. But because I'm bottom watering in an earth box, I can actually mound underneath this mulch layer and feed the roots up there. And it's one of the biggest hacks with earth box. I'm going to show you how I do it right now by top dressing this back one. And then I'm just going to mimic that for the other 2 earth boxes. And then normally I would add some kashi in here. And I mentioned I'm holding off on the kashi until this breaks down a little bit. And then I'm going to go add kashi blend second as kind of a secondary top dress before I go into flower. I'm going to do the same here on the earth boxes. So I'm just going to add this and let it start to break down. When I go into flower, I'm going to put kashi blend on everything to kind of light it on fire and help it break down. I'm going to put down the dry material first, and then I'm going to put the compost. Let me turn this around. Since I've built the mod scrog with the bamboo poles, the plastic's now just going to slide up the pole. So I can lift it all the way up, and it just kind of pulls on it. And now I have access to underneath here. In fact, I can lift the whole thing up, where normally you can't do that because this plastic just stretches shut. So this little mod scrog provides kind of a canopy tech in here that allows me to get in. So let's do this. I like to do a little more when I'm doing earth boxes. So I'm going to do a 1/2 cup of the gnarly barley from Clackamas Coot. Guy taught me everything about this stuff. I'm top dressing the gnarly barley right now, and I might as well grab the bag because I want to mention Coot here. Coot's supported me since the beginning. He's a cantankerous old coot. It's hard to get him to kind of agree on anything except for what he likes in the garden, and he's very open and specific about it. He's been teaching a lot of us how to grow organic on the grow forums for decades, and it's because of a lot of his recipes and know-how that a lot of people got into this living soil style of cultivation, making your own compost, worm castings, all of it. He's been a huge proponent of, and to honor him, we created this gnarly barley, which a portion of the proceeds goes to him. We also plant trees, so two trees are planted for every one of these bags sold. The reason why the gnarly barley is named after Clackamas Coot is because this was his invention, his gift to the cannabis world, to the plant world. He was a bread baker, and by learning that, he also owned a nursery and did trees. He postulated that the fungus and the yeast that we use to get bread so active and airy, maybe that's similar stuff in the enzymes. So they would do like New York bagels, take malted barley extract, and specialty breads. It speeds up the biological process when you add malted seed. So his idea was to sprout seed and use the enzymes, and it works well. Well, when we learned more about the malt houses and how they sprout seeds, they sprout these specialty seeds, and they're even better than sprouted seed tea. And then we top dress with it by grinding it up. I really want to share with him and have a conversation of a lot of the behind the scenes stuff that we've talked about for the years, how a lot of this developed and evolved, and get his take on it and share it with you guys. We have a lot of private conversations, and I really want you to benefit from those behind the scenes. So if you want to see us do the interview with Clackamas Coot, discuss sprouted seed tea, anything related to Clackamas, let me know. I've already told him about it, something that he's planned on doing with us. We just don't have it pinned down on the exact date. Drop a comment in here, and that might help us speed it up a little bit. I've got the craft blend now. I'm gonna do a half cup of craft blend. All around the plant. That's pretty good. I don't want to overdo it. I just want to get a good layer. I can always add more later. Now here's the mounding that I talk about. It's already pretty full in here. I'm gonna go ahead and pack this with the BuildASoil now. Now if I make a mess in here, I'm gonna be coming back in here and cleaning up when I'm done, so it's not the end of the world. A lot of times I'll grab a scoop, but for now I'm just gonna use my hands. It's all good. One big handful, and essentially instead of measuring it, I'm trying to just get it even all the way across. And as I do this more than once, it kind of makes a mound here in the middle. That's why we call it mounding. The roots will just start to go in here and feed on all this. This is how you trick an earth box into acting like it's a significantly larger container. You can see that the earth boxes already act kind of like the 30 gallons, but there's only one bag of soil in here, which is insane. I mean, maybe a bag and a quarter. So now to keep that going so it doesn't run out when we go into stretch, when it really starts hammering away at it, it would kind of reveal that it didn't have as much if we didn't do this top dressing. But with a heavy top dressing and a week ahead of time, it's gonna be so loaded and active that the plant's it's not gonna skip a beat when we go into flower. It's just gonna jump with it. It's not gonna run out of nutrients. And my prediction is that a week after we go into flower, I'll be able to pull this back and you'll see white furry feeder roots up here in this compost Narbar craft blend mixture. And when you see the feeder roots, it's like undeniable that the whole system's working. It's pretty cool. There we go, I got a nice mound in there. That's all I need for now, but I've still got a little room on the sides here. That's gonna allow me to keep stacking. So as I go into flower, once it is finishing its stretch, depending on how the plant's looking and how the top dress is looking, if it's fully covered in feeder roots, I'll probably come in there after 2 weeks and put one more big top dress to ride it out the rest of flowering. And I wanna have the room to do that. So that's it, that's the top dress. I normally would come back in here and top water just a little bit to kind of glue this together and saturate it. I'm gonna take plain water and I'll probably add a little bit of Rootwise Biofos and some Rootwise enzymes just to kickstart the flower party and just break down this top dress. And I'll water it in, not very much. I'm gonna use the fan spray and just get it nice and wet up here so that the microbes start to bring it down. If all goes well, we'll be flipping to flower next week on Monday. We'll have another episode between there with a few things to talk about related to the process here and watering. And I also described to you a foliar spray I was gonna whip up. We're running out of time and battery life for the actual recording. So what I wanna do is mention it so I don't cheat you out of the knowledge of that. One of the things in living soil, even though I'm doing top dressing, it's all kind of like using your stomach. It's like eating, it's got to chew it and get its own food, even though I've put it in here. It's organic, it's not readily available. The plants have to work for it. That's part of the benefit. It makes them healthy. But much like an athlete at the gym, a lot of times those 3 square meals aren't enough. You need some snacks, you need a protein shake, you need vitamins, you need that extra when you're really working hard and demanding a lot. And those can all be organic as well. So a foliar spray to cheat, one of the things the plant has to do is it has to pull organically from here. It has to pull ammonium and nitrate. It has to mix these nitrogens together, and it has to create its own amino acids so that it can do a lot of its jobs. The other thing that can do it is biology can create amino acids, and the plants can kind of steal from that. So a lot of times in organics, we're using microbes, fulvic acids, sugars, things like that to trick it, lower the energy required for the plant to do its job. One of the ultimate tricks, though, is to take amino acids, made usually by fermentation. There's other ways, but we have a fish one called Pure Protein Dry, and we have the BuildASoil aminos. It's a 1.5 pound bag. That's the foliar spray that I'm gonna use today. I'm gonna put a tablespoon per gallon of the aminos, and I'm gonna put an 1/8 teaspoon of the Q. When I mix that together, it allows the Q helps it stick to the leaf, and the amino will actually go through the leaf. And there's all these special words for how it happens, but it's basically gonna transport through the leaf, and it's gonna give the plant the amino acids it would have had to work hard for on its own to digest and extract from the organic material. So in this way, I'm lowering the energy for the day. I just defoliated them, smashed them, stressed them out. So I'm gonna foliar all these by lowering the lights can be on, and when I'm feeding aminos, I like to feed in the beginning of the day, kind of like having your Wheaties for the day, so that it's got all its energy to rage. Where when I'm doing pest control, I like it at the end of the day so that they're saturated and annoying the pests all night and they're not getting dried out right away. But with a foliar spray for aminos, I want it in the morning. If it's outside, you can do it before the sun is fully intense and bright. If it's indoors, you can just dim it a little bit. I'm gonna foliar the underside of the leaves and the top side of the leaves with that formula, and that'll make them all reach and have all the free energy for the day. A lot of organic growers will do a living soil style with BuildASoil that doesn't have tons of nitrogen, and they'll spoon feed these amino acids because some plants like more, some like less. And amino acids, it's not like high nitrogen, it's the literal links of the chain that make the nitrogen. So it's easy to absorb, it won't burn your plants. It is the building block of life. And a lot of the other processes in the soil have to do with amino acids. So research amino acids, research amino acid foliars, and then if you don't have some aminos, go to buildasoil.com, buy the BuildASoil aminos. It's under Grower's Secret. And instead of buying like a 50-pound bag, we just make 1.5 pounds so you can try it out. And I think it's probably the #1 foliar spray that we use. It'll make a big difference, and I encourage you to try it. That's it. Thanks for following along. Subscribe, ask questions in here, and I'll see you on the next episode.